understand it's very difficult. I'm not a native Indonesian, so this I will try my best to speak slowly. If I go too fast, just throw something at me to slow down. So my role today is to really talk more about what we see going on within the industry globally, so that you can understand what's going on outside of Indonesia as well, because at the end of the day, it impacts Indonesia. The food and beverage industry is global. I'm very fortunate. I get to travel the world. I get to see what's going on in different countries with different manufacturers. And then what I'd like to start off with is to share some of the key trends that we are seeing going on within the industry. Now, these are related to digital, but not solely related to digital. If you look on the first one on the top left, I think everywhere around the world, manufacturers had a focus about reducing the number of products they were making, the number of SKUs, because it costs you too much money to have that inventory tied up in working capital. If you look at what's happening today in food and beverage, it's an explosion of SKUs. People want customized products, to specific markets. So there's an explosion of SKUs that manufacturers have to do. That puts a lot of demand on your manufacturing plants. Instead of producing one product, you now produce 500 products. If you're not flexible and agile, your plants become inefficient. If your supply chain is not optimized, you have a lot of capital tied up across your supply chain. So this explosion, because of changing consumer tastes, is really dramatically impacting the way you operate your supply chain. CapEx and OpEx. I don't think there's anyone in this room that could hold their hand up and say, we have lots of CapEx to spend. Yeah. I don't think anyone can say that. What you have in food and bev is lots of factories which are 30, 40, 50 years old, with technology which is equally as old. So how do you digitize assets which are mechanical? So again, this is a challenge. You cannot simply replace assets. You have to have a way, a methodology to modernize these assets without having to spend APEX. So a big focus on how you spend your operational expenditure to improve these aging assets. Raw material availability and price. With what's happening with global warming, with the extreme weather conditions, if you look across the globe, there's about a 1% reduction in yield going on with crop production right now. There's also a bigger challenge in that crop production is moving. So where one country was capable to produce a raw material at one point in time, weather is forcing that material to produce somewhere else in the world, which puts, again, a challenge on your supply chain, because where you source your materials from are starting to change as well. In addition to this, tied back to that first point on the consumer side, your consumers are thinking more about health and wellness. So you have to think about how you can reformulate your products. With things like sugar tax, with things like people looking at what they imbibe inside their body, you may need to reformulate your products to make sure that you still cater for the market that you're serving. So again, it puts a challenge on where you're buying your materials from. Jumping down to the bottom left next. Regulations was normally something you found in life science. Very tight regulations to make sure that products were not counterfeit. They weren't tampered with. Well, in food and bev, regulations are getting higher and higher and higher, almost to the level of life science, because of some of the impacts you've seen with tainted products making its way into the supply chain, with people being made sick, people even dying from tainted food products. So regulations to ensure that we can make the products secure, the supply chain secure, but also very importantly, to protect your brand equity. You can find that if you have one recall, and you have to recall 6 months worth of production because you cannot get it down to that batch, it may put you out of business because your brand is destroyed from that bad press that you get. So traceability is key. The middle one is an interesting one, workforce dynamic. I'm a very young guy. I'm only 18 years old, so I'm very fortunate that I don't fall in this category, I wish. But one of the problems we have in manufacturing is we need people to work in the factories still. And the Generation Z that is coming through, they're all used to working on iPads and swiping and swooshing. They don't want to work in a factory which is unpleasant, which is automation systems from the 1960s and 70s. We have to modernize to make it attractive to the workforce. We have to re-educate the workforce to make sure these people that only want to work for Google want to come and work inside manufacturing. So to entertain and to excite this new workforce, we have to change. And the final point, digital. It's both an opportunity and a threat for everyone in this room. It's an opportunity because it can transform your business. But it's also a threat, because if you don't change, you will be changed. Because if you look at the startup companies in food and beverage, the reason they're taking a lot of market share from the big guys is because they're agile. They can adapt to the consumer quicker. They can reformulate their products quicker. Whereas when you've got companies which are old and have lots of bureaucracy and hierarchy, to make a decision takes a long time. These new companies are quick. So if you don't start to digitize, you will be disrupted. So looking at this, so one of the challenges as well, everyone speaks about the IIoT, the Industrial Internet of Things, Industry 4.0. So what we're seeing inside the industry is lots of data. Yeah, if you look at this chart here, the number of connected devices, Luke spoke about it. We've been connecting our products for 20 years. I think if you go in your factories, you've been collecting data in your factories for probably 20 years. With this explosion in digitization, it just means more data. And data does not make you smarter. Data just makes you more confused unless you use it in a smart manner. So really what we're focused on digitization is not just connecting products, but figuring out how you're going to use that data. So IoT is about accelerating. We see the convergence of three key areas, sorry. We're looking to make sure that we're really starting to tie together the way you run your processes, but also with your utilities that supply your processes, and making sure that we put the software on top to drive wisdom. So rather than just giving information about how your process, how your supply chain is performing, give some wisdom on the key things you should be doing to improve it. Or even better, make it self-learning. Make plants become autonomous. Use that intelligence to really go closed loop to make sure you improve the way you run your processes in your supply chain. This is a study that was done by LNS back in 2018. And if you look on this chart where people say, customers like yourself say you're investing in IoT, you'll see up at the top there, remote monitoring. I think everyone's been doing that for a long time. Yeah, so it's not new. That's not digitization. Yeah? Digitization are the ones that are further down that list. When you start to look at transforming your industry, transforming your supply chain, that is where digitization is going to start to make the real impact within your business. Sorry, the slides are very slow at updating. So what we see within the industry when it comes to digitization, and you'll see the title of this slide, it's what we see, what we hear, but we don't always see happening inside manufacturers. So when I talk to companies around the world, a lot of them are talking about optimizing the operations. They talk about a digital twin, and you'll see it outside with Aviva. Not many people, if any, in food and bev are doing that right now. So very slow adoption. You see lots of people talking about process control and advanced process control. Again, more prevalent within the industry, but it's in pockets. Because capturing that domain expertise to allow that to happen doesn't exist in every segment within food and beverage. If you look at the empowerment of employees, one simple one, if you look at recipes, how many people in this room have recipe systems which are still on paper or digitized in Excel? Yeah, that's not digitization. Yeah, so even basic things about how you manage your core product, your ingredients that go into the product you sell is not digitized. Low-hanging fruit that many customers are talking about, but still, when you look across the globe, many companies are still failing to implement these basic things to help with digitization. When you start to go on to the area of transforming offerings, so there's a lot of blue sky thinking going on within companies just now. How do you move from batch processes to continuous processes to make your plant more agile? How do you start to drive collaboration across your supply chain between different parts of your organization? Again, good ideas, but we don't see a lot of it happening within the industry right now. And on this one, on the new business models, integrating the supply chain. And I'll come on to this point later. To integrate your supply chain, you need to make sure your quality department is working with your planning department, that is working with your marketing department, operations, supply chain. If these parts are not integrated, how do you start to drive integration across your whole supply chain? And then finally, the most important piece for every single person in this room, the customer. It's great to go and improve your operations. It's great to go and improve the way that your supply chain is working. But if you don't put the customer at the front of what you're driving within your business, you have an issue because you can't sell your product. So getting that voice of customer into your manufacturing supply chain so that when you're agile, when you're changing, it's driven by the customer and not your internal view of what's going on in the market. So digital collaboration is a critical thing for dealing with your customer. Now, when you look across this, on the left-hand side, a lot of these initiatives are around about cost control. On the right-hand side is true transformation. This is where you start to drive the revenue growth within your business and also the sustainable success. But you'll see a word at the bottom here, underneath that arrow. It's adoption. So organizational change. Digitization has to drive organizational change within your business. And I'll use the word there, adopt, first of all. And the example I'll use, when you look at augmented reality or virtual reality, as you'll see with the Berto coffee machine outside, you've got a workforce which is maybe 60 years old. A guy who's been working in your factory for 30 years. And you suddenly give him a tablet with augmented reality. It's a shock to his system. It's like organ rejection. He's, oh, I don't want to do this. He's worked a certain way for 30 years. He does not want to change. So how do you bring digitization into your organization if you do not drive organizational change? So it's a key point to consider. For digitization to work, you have to think about how your workforce needs to change. So this slide you saw earlier, from Luc and Xavier. An area that a lot of people are focused on with digitization is this top-to-bottom integration. How do you take information from your plant, shove it up to the cloud, drive information, and give performance improvement? You can get significant wins just from doing this. So a big focus of Schneider and our partners is this vertical integration. Digitization, though, the big win is when you drive the horizontal integration. How do you start to integrate all the way from the farms, all the way from agriculture? How do you tie that supply chain, integrate it all seamlessly, digitally, all the way through logistics, manufacturing, your cold chain, right down to the retail outlet and the consumer? When you drive that horizontal integration, that's when digitization will make a big impact for the business. The big issue we've got here, and you'll see a different use of the word at the bottom, adapt. So again, the second point for digitization, to achieve this horizontal integration, it's not just the individual you've got in your plant that you have an issue with, it's your organizational structure. Because if you look at most companies, the structure that they have is built based upon silos. You have a group that looks after quality, a group that looks after marketing, a group that looks after supply chain. How do you get them to work together? If your structure is designed to have people working in silos, how do you drive that horizontal integration? So being able to adapt your organizational structure to behave differently is also a key thing you have to consider when you're thinking about bringing digital technology into your supply chain. So just think about it. So I've got 3 slides here to wind forward to think about what digitization could do. So this first one, just imagine if you could track all the way from the farm, from the source material, so that you know which farmer is producing what to what quality standard, so that when it arrives at your manufacturing plant automatically sets itself up based upon the quality criteria. You then manage it and trace it all the way through the supply chain right down to the consumer. So you've got immediate intelligence. If there's an issue with that product, you know why. Being able to get a lot of one. So if you have a recall, get it down to an individual product rather than 6 months of production. Not only for traceability though, think about the issue with yield. Across your supply chain, you have lots of losses. By doing traceability from the farm all the way to the consumer, you can start to identify where you're losing yield. Doable today, but only if you start to integrate horizontally. The same gets applied on this slide with the way you do engineer your supply chain. The use of a digital twin becomes extremely valuable when you look at how you engineer your supply chain, how you engineer your facilities. Rather than spending money on the assets straight away, make it digitally. When you make it digital, it makes you optimize the way you're on your plant. When you modify your plant, you can test it digitally before you spend any money on assets within your plant, making your whole supply chain very efficient, very effective. This is also key when you look at your manufacturing plants today, and I had this discussion on the golf course yesterday. Many plants, when they introduce a new product, they put a new line in, a new packaging line. So you may end up having 10, 12, 20 packaging lines in your facility because of the number of SKUs you have to produce. Each line may be running at 60% efficiency. Why not get them all up to 80, 85%? Then you could reduce your staffing, you could reduce your assets that you require. But again, the culture within food and beverage has been when I have a new product, I will buy new assets rather than optimize what I already have within my plant. And the final one, a key one, is around the environment, sustainability. This is about optimizing the productivity of your plants, but it's also about how do we make plants carbon neutral? How do we make them zero waste? So all waste streams, can we reuse them? Whether it be to generate energy for the plant or just reusable waste streams. So how do we start to look at that whole ecosystem within the plant to make sure that it's efficient? Again, all doable today with the technology that exists. So the 4 core areas that we're focused on in Schneider, we've boiled all of this down, all of the areas we spoke about, into 4 key areas, and you can see them on the chart here. So the first one, when we look at smart manufacturing, this is an area which is kind of at the heart of Schneider. So this is inside the 4 walls of your plant. How do we start to make sure the process side of your business, when you're formulating recipes, let's use the technology to make sure it's seamless, it's integrated, that we can make closed loop control, we could do advanced process control to improve the yield of your plants. On the packaging side, how can we make sure fast changeover, setup reduction, so that all these SKUs can be performed seamlessly? How do we give the site intelligence, the software systems, to really drive performance improvement across your manufacturing plant as well? So this area is core to Schneider, inside the 4 walls of your plant. The second area, on smart facilities, is an area where I think a lot of people in this room know Schneider best. The electrical piece, where we're putting the power distribution into your plants. If you look at the way we work with a lot of food and beverage companies, and again, this comes down to the structure inside your business, this is an area which is separate to manufacturing. The utilities is a separate building outside of your manufacturing area. Going forward, it has to be integrated. The way you use steam, water, air, gas, electricity, it shouldn't be a pipe through the wall and you just say what you want. You should control it. If you need a specific energy profile to make your product, it should be part of your recipe. Energy should be part of your ingredient in your process. So by integrating what we do in utilities with microgrid, with power management, we want to make sure that it's fully integrated inside your manufacturing facilities as well. The next area is an area which I think will be new to a lot of people here in this room. What we're doing on food safety. So this covers inside the plant. So how do you start to digitize things like HACCP processes? How do you make sure you use access systems to prevent people doing things they shouldn't do outside of standard operating procedures? Let's digitize it to make sure we can avoid human errors coming into the way you produce your product. Likewise, this traceability. How do we start to tie in your product right from the start all the way through to what goes into the packaging? So things like mislabeling. A big issue for food companies is when you have the wrong label on the product and you forget to mention there could be an allergen. In Europe, this is a big thing on labeling. We need to make sure that the label is accurate to what's inside the product. It's going across the world as well. So making sure your batch, your ingredients are indeed what's inside the can is extremely important. So solutions for mislabeling. And the last point there on serialization. Again, you'll see it out here with our partner Anexto. It's a critical thing for us, not being able to just track a pallet, but being able to track the individual product. So if you look inside pharmaceutical, this has been done for a number of years with a program called ePedigree. Inside food and beverage, we want to serialize every single finished product so you have a unique code that you can track that product all the way through the supply chain to the end consumer, and we can demonstrate that outside in the area just next door. So the full idea of food safety is to make sure we can track that product all the way from the source, all the way down to the consumer, which ties into the next point on the smart supply chain. It's about tying all this information together from the farm. is the product that's in the ingredients, if it's cocoa, is it sustainably sourced? Making sure that you can, if the farmer has certification, that you can prove it right away on how you're using that product in your supply chain. How that product is then managed through the supply chain. So if it's got certain criteria for cooling, the way it's transported, how can you track that and integrate it across your supply chain? All the way down to the final area where a large part of our business is on coolers inside retail outlets. How do we get the data from that cooler to make sure the product is not becoming tainted at the point of supply as well? So integrating across this whole supply chain is key for us. How you then capture all of this information in the product information sheets, again, which we can demonstrate next door as well, so that you've got real-time information for that individual product on its ingredients, how it got from point A to point B, and what happened during its lifetime of its journey from end to end as well. This is true digitization when you can tie these pieces together, and I encourage you to spend some time in the marketplace because you can see this end-to-end traceability next door. So, our discussion today, well, over the next 2 days or the next 3 days, is not just that piece in the middle. It's not just about manufacturing. It's at the heart of what we want to discuss with you. But it's also about what you're doing with your business upstream, with your farms, with your raw material suppliers, but also more importantly, all the way down to your consumer as well. We want to make sure that we're working with you to start to collect that data across your supply chain, from no matter who your supplier is, no matter what technology exists within your supply chain. How do we get that data into the system to drive that horizontal integration? And when we have that, we can drive the apps, the analytics to improve your business performance. A key part though, Schneider cannot do this alone. And I think you'll see that in the marketplace as well. This is not just about the EcoStruxure of our architecture, it's about the EcoStruxure of partners. To do end-to-end traceability like we talk about, it's about how you collaborate. We ask you to collaborate inside your business. We have to collaborate with partners across the supply chain as well. Whether it be your OEMs that build your machines, whether it be the companies that specialize in agricultural equipment, how do we make sure we drive the collaboration to do this integration across the supply chain? Digitization can only be achieved via collaboration. So this is why when you look at the presentations that are coming up, we've split them across these areas. So hopefully you get more and more insight from my colleagues that are going to be coming up on stage over the next 2 days. We're going to cover all these points to touch more of these point solutions that integrate to drive this complete supply chain. We also have common sessions as well, which we will cover, which talk about important things like cybersecurity. Because when you look at cybersecurity, when you're integrating horizontally across partners and driving collaboration, there's potential huge risk to your business as well. Because by collecting data, by integrating systems, if you don't do it in a secure manner, you've got big exposure within your business as well. So we'll also cover that in the common sessions as well. And finally, I encourage you please to go and speak to our partners as well. As I mentioned before, this is about a collaboration of partners across the supply chain. We have many of them out in the marketplace there as well. Please go and spend time with them to understand how their solutions fit within our end-to-end strategy across the supply chain as well. And finally, to close, because I'm not sure if I'm on time, I've not had anyone put the hook to grab me off the stage yet. If I'd like you to leave this event with, two things I'd like you to leave this event with. The first one is that you see Schneider in a different light. Because I think a lot of the stuff we're going to show you over the next 2 days, hopefully enlighten you, wow, Schneider's not just the electrical company. We're doing a lot more. The second thing I'd like you to leave with is work with us like a partner. We want to partner with you. We want to be able to sit down with you to understand your challenges, your drivers, and how we can help you with this ecosystem of partners to make your digital transformation successful. Indonesia is key for us. Southeast Asia is key for us. It's my third largest business globally within the world, and it's a key focus we have for in the business. So my call to action is please utilize us as a partner for your business going forward. Okay, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mike. I'd actually like you to leave with